Three identical strangers, the true story that shocked the world. Imagine arriving at college on what should be one of the biggest days of your life, only to have complete strangers hug you, call you by another name, and treat you like they've known you forever. At first, you'd probably think it was some kind of prank, but for Robert Shafran, it was the beginning of one of the most unbelievable true stories ever recorded. A story of three brothers separated at birth, reunited by chance, and later discovering that their entire lives had been part of a secret psychological experiment. This is the haunting true story of Robert Shafran, Eddie Galland, and David Kellman. A day that changed everything. It was September 1980. 19-year-old Robert Shafran had just arrived at Sullivan County Community College in New York. He was nervous, excited, and ready to start a new chapter of his life. But something felt strange. Students he had never met smiled at him. Some greeted him by the name Eddie. Others hugged him as if he were an old friend. One girl even ran over and kissed him on the cheek. Robert was completely confused. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else," he kept saying. But everyone insisted he was Eddie Galland. One student, Michael Domnitz, couldn't believe what he was seeing. His best friend, Eddie Galland, had attended the same college the previous semester. The resemblance wasn't just close, it was perfect. The same face, the same smile, the same voice, even the same walk. Without wasting another second, Michael asked Robert to get into his car. They drove straight to Eddie's house. When the front door opened, two young men stood face to face. Neither spoke. They simply stared. It was like looking into a mirror. Within minutes, they discovered they shared the exact same birthday. Both had been adopted. Both had been born in the same hospital. The impossible suddenly became reality. They were identical twins who had been separated at birth. Neither of them had known the other existed. Then came an even bigger surprise. Their emotional reunion quickly became national news. Newspapers published photographs of the smiling twins embracing each other. Television stations couldn't stop talking about them. Millions of Americans were captivated by the miracle. But just a few days later, a teenager named David Kellman picked up a newspaper. The moment he saw the front page photograph, his heart nearly stopped. The two young men in the picture looked exactly like him. Same eyes, same hair, same smile, same face. David immediately contacted the families. Medical tests were arranged. DNA confirmed the unbelievable truth. They weren't twins. They were identical triplets. Three brothers, separated at birth, raised in three different homes, completely unaware that the other two even existed. The odds of such a reunion happening by pure chance were almost impossible. Yet somehow, it had happened. Heh. Overnight celebrities, America instantly fell in love with the three brothers. They became media sensations overnight. Television shows invited them as special guests. Newspapers competed for interviews. People couldn't get enough of the incredible story. Everywhere they went, crowds gathered. The brothers enjoyed every moment. They laughed together, finished each other's sentences, played practical jokes on reporters. Eventually, they rented an apartment together in New York City. Later, they opened a successful restaurant called Triplets Romanian Steakhouse. Life seemed perfect. It looked like destiny had finally reunited what fate had separated. But beneath the happiness, something far darker was waiting to be discovered. The similarities that shocked scientists. The more time the brothers spent together, the stranger things became. Even though they had grown up in completely different households, they had developed astonishingly similar personalities. All three smoked the same brand of cigarettes. They loved the same foods, shared the same sense of humor, had similar hobbies, preferred similar styles of clothing, even their body language matched. Friends watched them wrestle exactly the same way. They laughed alike, sat alike, spoke alike. Even more astonishing, each brother remembered having similar recurring dreams during childhood. How could three people raised separately become so incredibly alike? Scientists called it fascinating. The public called it miraculous. But one question refused to disappear. Why had they been separated in the first place? The question nobody wanted to answer. The adoptive parents demanded answers. Why had the adoption agency never mentioned the existence of identical siblings? Surely this couldn't have been an accident. Again and again, they contacted the adoption agency. Again and again, they received vague responses. Finally, The truth began to emerge. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't bad record keeping. It had all been planned. The secret experiment. The brothers had unknowingly become part of one of America's most controversial psychological studies. The adoption agency, Louise Wise Services, had secretly cooperated with child psychiatrist Dr. Peter Neubauer. His goal was to answer one of psychology's oldest questions. What shapes a person more? Nature or nurture? Is our personality determined by our genes or by the environment in which we grow up? To find out, researchers made a shocking decision. Whenever identical siblings were born and placed for adoption, they separated them. On purpose, the children were placed into families from different social and economic backgrounds. No one was told the truth, not the parents, not the children. No informed consent was ever given. 3 different lives. Robert entered a wealthy household. His adoptive father was a doctor. He grew up with financial comfort and opportunity. Eddie was raised in a middle-class family. His adoptive father worked as a teacher. David grew up in a working-class immigrant family where life was often more challenging. Researchers quietly observed all 3 boys for years, several times each year. Psychologists visited their homes. Parents believed these were routine follow-up visits related to adoption. But that wasn't true. Researchers filmed the boys, recorded conversations, measured their development, compared personalities, collected psychological data, all while hiding the single most important fact. Each child had 2 identical brothers living nearby, a hidden pain. Years later, another heartbreaking truth emerged. As babies, all 3 brothers had displayed unusual behavior. Each repeatedly banged his head against the crib. Each suffered severe anxiety. Experts later suggested these behaviors may have reflected the trauma of sudden separation from one another, though the exact causes remain debated. The emotional bond between identical siblings may have been broken before they were old enough to understand what had happened. Yet somehow, their minds remembered. Fame couldn't heal the damage. At first, the reunion seemed magical, but living together wasn't easy. The brothers had different upbringings, different expectations, different emotional wounds. Arguments became more frequent, business pressures increased. The excitement surrounding their reunion slowly faded. Then mental health struggles became impossible to ignore. Each brother faced emotional challenges in adulthood. Among them, Eddie struggled with severe depression. Attach a tragic ending. In 1995, the unimaginable happened. Eddie Gallen died by suicide at the age of just 33 after a long struggle with depression. His death devastated Robert and David. It also forced the world to ask difficult questions. Had separating the brothers contributed to their suffering? Could their lives have been different if they had grown up together? Those questions remain unanswered. Locked secrets. Robert and David later sought access to the research files documenting their lives, but the complete records weren't available. Many of Dr. Neubauer's study documents were deposited in Yale University's archives with restrictions that keep them sealed until 2065. The surviving brothers may never see everything researchers wrote about them. Some answers may remain hidden forever. A story the world could never forget. In 2018, filmmakers brought this astonishing true story to millions through the award-winning documentary 3 Identical Strangers. What begins like a miracle slowly transforms into a mystery, then into a tragedy, and finally into a powerful warning. Science has the ability to change lives, but without ethics, it can also destroy them. The story of Robert Shafran, Eddie Galland, and David Kellman reminds us that behind every scientific experiment are real human beings with emotions, families, and futures that deserve respect. Some discoveries are simply too costly when they come at the expense of human lives. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: no pursuit of knowledge is worth sacrificing the dignity, trust, and humanity of innocent children.